In the 2020 NBA offseason, Russell Westbrook was traded to the Washington Wizards. And through 11 games, he looks terrible, and the Wizards also look terrible. The Wizards started the season 0-5. On January 1st, their sixth game of the season versus the Minnesota Timberwolves, Russell Westbrook was listed as inactive. The Wizards came out and they killed the Wolves. In the third quarter alone, the Wolves were outscored by 26 points. This moved the Wizards to being 1-5. The next game was January 3rd versus the Nets. Bradley Beal and Russell Westbrook both had a poor shooting night. Beal shot 36% from the field and Russ shot 28%. But still, the Wizards managed to squeeze out a win against the Nets when both Kyrie and Kevin Durant were playing. So, had this team figured it out? No, they went on to lose 3 games in a row. On January 11th, the Wizards got their third win of the season against the Suns. It was another game where Russ was listed as inactive. The Wizards came out and got a 21-point win over a good Suns team. So, what's the deal? Because we all know that Russell Westbrook is a good NBA player, but why do he and the Wizards both look so bad? To figure this out, I took a look at some of Russ's stats. I looked at this year through the first 11 games. I looked at last year, his most recent All-Star year. And then I looked at 2017, which was his MVP season. When he was an MVP in 2017, he averaged 31.6 points per game, 10.4 assists per game, and 10.7 rebounds per game, which is averaging a triple-double for the season. He shot 43% from the field and 34% from three. And 34% for NBA point guard standards might not seem that great, but for Russell Westbrook, 34% from three was amazing. His effective field goal percentage, which takes into account threes being worth more than twos, was 48%. So now let's compare these stats to his All-Star year last year. From 2017 to 2020, his points per game dropped 14%, his assists per game dropped 33%, and his rebounds per game dropped 26%. His field goal percentage did go up by 4%, and his effective field goal percentage went up by about 1%. But his three-point percentage dropped by 8%. So, from 2017 to 2020, he dropped in nearly all main statistical categories, which you could expect though playing with James Harden, and it was still enough to be an All-Star. So, if this performance is All-Star worthy, let's compare these stats to 2021 this year to see how close he is to All-Star level play. So, through the first 11 games of this season, he's averaging 19.3 points per game, 11.3 assists per game, and 9.7 rebounds per game, which is nearly a triple-double. However, he's shooting 38% from the field and 30% from three, and his effective field goal percentage is about 41.5%. Using 2020 as a baseline, his points per game dropped by 29%. However, he saw an increase of 61% in assists per game and 23% in rebounds per game. But his field goal percentage dropped 9%, and his effective field goal percentage dropped about 8%. Three-point percentage rose by 4%. And although he's seeing an improvement in some categories, it's being overshadowed by his abysmal shooting. And yes, he did see a 4% increase in three-point percentage from last year, but even with a 4% increase, it's still very inefficient. But still, these general stats don't tell the whole story. So now let's take a look into the advanced stats to see what changed between 2020 and 2021. First thing that stands out is his turnover percentage. In 2020, he had a 15% chance of turning the ball over, and in 2021, so far, he has a 20% chance of turning the ball over. But I would say this issue pales in comparison to the real problem with Russell Westbrook right now, and that's where he's taking his shots from. In 2020, 42% of his shots came within 3 feet of the basket, and he shot a field goal percentage of 64% at this range. In 2021, he's only taking 16% of his shots within 3 feet of the basket. And although he's shooting a little bit better at 67% from this range, it means he's just not getting to the rim. And the spot on the floor where Russ is going to be most efficient when he takes his shots is right in front of the basket. Right now, he's shooting mostly jump shots, and Russ is not a good jump shooter. He's a career 30% from three-point range. He's just not a guy that should rely on his shooting. But he's still averaging about 20 field goal attempts per game, So where are these shots coming from if they're not right at the rim? So far this year, 30% of his shot attempts are coming from a zone that's 16 feet away from the basket to the three-point line. That number is double the percentage of the shots he took from that zone last year. He's also taking about 24% of his shots from outside the three-point line. That number is up about 8% from last year. He is shooting better from those zones this year than he was last year, but it doesn't matter. Those numbers are still inefficient. He does not have the jump shooter skill set to warrant taking these shots. He would have to make serious improvements to his shooting before these attempts could be efficient. The assists and the rebounds will always be there for Russ, but his offensive consistency and efficiency relies on him taking a lot of his shots at the basket. And that has pretty much stopped this year. We saw him have this issue last year at the beginning of the season with the Rockets. With Clint Capella in the paint, Russ had a hard time finding space to drive to the rim. He started to rely more on his jump shooting, and like I said before, he's not a jump shooter. So how do the Rockets fix this? Daryl Morey traded Clint Capella to Atlanta, and guess what? It worked. Russ said, "I'm done shooting threes," and started making more drives to the basket, and it worked. He looked incredible, the Rockets were good, and he was an all-star again. So even though he looks bad to start this season, I don't think it's that Russ has gotten insanely worse, he just isn't driving to the rim, which is how he has succeeded in the past. And I'm not sure why he's not doing that. He still looks fast, strong, and athletic. Maybe it's the team building, which could mean two things. The first would be that the current lineup does not provide enough floor spacing to get space to go to the rim. But I find that hard to believe. The rookie, Danny Avdija, who is being extremely underused right now, is a great three-point shooter. We know that Bradley Beal is going to pull a defender wherever he is in the court. Rui isn't exactly a good three-point shooter, and Thomas Bryant won't take a lot, even though he can make them. But then they have Davis Bertans coming off the bench. His nickname is the Latvian Laser because he's such a good shooter. So maybe shooting is the issue, but it could also be Scott Brooks. His rotations are weird, and his playbook doesn't fit his players' strengths and weaknesses. And right now the word is that he's on the hot seat. Anyway, what I think it comes down to is if Russell Westbrook wants to be successful this season, he has to get more shots at the rim.